Okay, hey, we gave everybody a few extra minutes because we know there was a confusion on, hey, were we meeting at South or were we meeting at East? So I think this is most of who's going to be here tonight. Want to thank y'all for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. I know that we have lots of things going on this evening, a lot of other activities, and when you try to start putting something on the calendar that's going to work for everybody, when you're talking about 40 people, that's just not really possible. So thank you everybody for being here tonight. I would remind you that we do have a sign-in sheet. So if it hasn't come around, be sure that you get signed in, just so that we have a record of attendance and everything. And we'll get started. For those of you who don't know who I am, I introduced myself last time, but if you missed out and you're wondering who this guy is up here talking to me, I'm Brian Allen. I am the superintendent of schools, and we're going on this journey together. To try to figure out what we may be able to do with our facilities, both in the immediate and in the long term. So we're going to try to create a plan on what we can do now, but then we also want to know what we're going to do in 7, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And kind of have a good idea and a good plan together. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike. I think he's going to briefly kind of refresh what we talked about last time for those of you who missed, and then we'll get into tonight's discussion. We're not going to be here quite as long as we were here at the first meeting, so if you were at the last one and you were about to doze off, don't worry, we won't be here quite that long this evening, but I think we've got a good meeting ahead and some good stuff. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike Baker with Park Hill.
Okay.
Thanks, sir.
Brian. Well, thank you all for joining us again. I know everybody's got a lot of things to do during the week, and we're getting closer to the holidays. So this is our second meeting. For those of you that may not have been to the first one, I'll introduce our team. With us tonight is Chip. Chip Whitlock is one of our project architects, and he's been doing work here already with the schools and the roofs. Been with Park Hill for many years. I would say probably 20-something years. Alan Wolf is he's a fellow principal. He's a structural engineer, and he's really a good person that is going to help us when we start talking about costs of repairs of schools, what's generating in construction inflation, things that are going to impact us. We'll talk a little bit about opportunities that we have for funding and some things that will probably impact your decisions. And so joining us also tonight is Aaron Campbell. He's one of our architectural interns. He's coming up in the business. He's one of our shining stars, and we thought we'd bring him along. He's part of our K-12 group as well. Just wanted him to be able to lead this process because it's very important, because we're trying to decide the direction you guys are going to take, and we're going to give you the information that's going to help you make these decisions tonight. And again, I'm Mike Baker. I'm a master planner. I've been with Park Hill for almost 35 years, and I've been doing K-12 work for a long time. It's a great area to be an architect in, and so I master plan. I take your ideas, and we start looking at them from a cost standpoint. We look at options. We start putting diagrams down on paper, just so you know how big projects are, what the current trends are in K through 12. And
real quick, everybody have an agenda? If you need one, raise your hand real quickly. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you bet. We've got a few things we're going to try and stay focused tonight. Of course, we're going to talk a little bit about BISD. The Texas Association of School Boards has done an assessment of your facilities, a very in-depth assessment. Park Hill wanted to kind of come out here and see what they reported in their report. We wanted to confirm a few things. We want to make sure we understood them better. So Alan and a team of engineers and other architects came out and looked at South and East specifically, walked through the junior high as well, the CTE and band, I believe. And then we're going to talk some about, there's some interesting things that are coming up with taxation, and especially with school districts. We're going to talk about those a little bit tonight too, because it's kind of interesting and it may help you make your decisions. And then we'll talk about indexes. These indexes are what we use to kind of give you that tool. Is it wise to spend money on an existing facility, or is it wiser to spend a little bit more and get a new facility? And again, we don't know what those projects are yet. We don't know exactly what those costs are, but we're getting to a point where by the end of tonight, we would like to know maybe directions that you would like us to explore. What types of projects? We're not making decisions yet. We'll do that probably in January. We'll start kind of focusing in on those, and we'll figure out, what is that comfort level of your funding, how you're going to fund them. Is it going to be a bond? Is it fund balance, a combination, or whatever? We'll kind of figure out that decision together. And then we'll kind of talk a little bit about, the last time we were here, we got everybody's kind of their input on what they wanted, what they'd like to have, and things that they would avoid if they had a new school, or if we kept the existing schools. And so we'll talk a little bit about what you all told us as a group, and also what the educators told us as well. And then for those of you that weren't here at the last meeting, we really talked a lot about our process. And right now, the district hired us back in September, I believe, and our first meeting was in October. And so we are still at the very beginning of this process. We're just planning. We're putting ideas down. We're looking at cost. We're trying to gauge comfort level, things like that. And then ultimately, by the end of January and moving into February, you're going to make a recommendation to the board one way or the other with what projects you want to do, if in fact you do want to do projects. And then they'll call an election in February. The election will be in May. And then when the election passes, then we get to work. That's when we start doing the true design. And one of the things we wanted to stress, especially to the educators, is we're not designing the facility now. We're just trying to figure out a scope, a type of facility. Is it a collaborative type? Is it additions to a school? Is it renovations? Or is it a very traditional school? And we talked a little bit about that. And we got some really good input about, from the educators especially, what they expected. And then it'll take us, about 8 months to design this, and probably about 18 months to construct whatever. And if we do a new facility versus renovations and additions, there's probably going to be 2 different time frames that we do. And so Alan's going to talk a little bit about the work that's been done by the Texas Association of School Boards. And one of the things I want to point out, they're a very objective group to look at your facilities. They have no skin in the game. We would like to say we don't either. We want to make sure that you understand we're very objective as well. We want what's best for Breckenridge ISD, and Alan wanted to vet those numbers, and we've done that as well, where we feel like we've got a really good idea of what TASB said, and we've confirmed a few things, and then from those two, we've been able to kind of put some numbers together and just tell you, what are the possible costs if you were to bring 2 existing facilities up to code and educational adequacy versus building something new. Alan, you want to take that?
Sure. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate y'all being here tonight. And wanted to go through a little bit of what TASB's done. And this actually happened before we were hired here at Breckenridge. And so they looked at all the district inventories. We're going to talk about, we looked specifically and in detail at 2 buildings, South and East Elementary. We did go, Mitch and our team went over to the high school, so we've seen the band hall and some of the CTE facilities as well. But this is what TASB did, and they have a process similar to our process. When we do condition assessment, it's very common for them to do condition assessments, and then we work in other districts where they've done those as well. So we're familiar with their tool. It's a really good tool. It's got like an interactive dashboard and database where you can sort. And I don't know, Brian, probably would fit in 2 or 3 binders, the
Yeah.
amount of stuff that they've done. Part of what they do, they also identify areas where maybe an engineer needs to go look at things, whether it's an electrical item or a structural item. And so this is kind of the order that they had in terms of the facilities that they had the most concern with, or as we talk about building performance measurements, like Mike mentioned, metrics or indices. Those were the ones where they use similar indices as we do, and those are the ones, the top 4 that they had concern with. So I'm going to kind of shift gears and talk about what we did with our team. So we wanted, because these two were the South Elementary and East Elementary were in the top 4, we wanted to go take a look at those, because I know that you guys talked last meeting about your elementary needs. So last week, last Monday, I guess, we brought electrical and mechanical engineers out, also brought one of our cost estimators out. We have 2 gentlemen in our office who used to work for construction general contractors. And so they help a ton with us as we start putting together analysis of repair needs. And then I'm a structural engineer, and you might wonder, well, why is he up here talking about cost? When I started in the firm, which was 27 years ago, the structural department in our firm did all the cost estimating. So I got started doing it a number of years ago. And I'm a data guy, so I'm giving you guys free license today. If I get too involved in a chart or a graph, I got a regression graph and everything in here. So if you're like, that's enough, but keep going, just stop me or wave me on. But I had an opportunity when I was younger in my career. We do a lot of work with the Department of Defense Education Activity as well. And as it so happened, they had schools all over the southeastern United States. And so early 2000s, I did a lot of facility assessment work and was on teams with them. And we've done 3 more assessments for them in the last 20 years since then. So that's how I got involved in facility condition assessments. And now I do that with our K-12 group all over the state. We've got a lot of data collected. What I'm going to do is talk tonight about some of the analysis of that data. So we've gone through East and South, and this is for a later time. Once options are developed, we'll also vet those against your peer districts. So if you identify a certain amount of square footage, whether it's addition or renovation or new, we can compare that with other school districts of similar size. And you'll see an example of that here a little bit later. TEA has a specified process that we use. It's actually in the Texas Administrative Code. They have the shoulds and the shalls. I think to great credit of your school district, they've asked us, they're looking at all of these things. And so we're going to talk specifically today about building age, condition. We will talk some about how, I know we had a great session. I wasn't here when you all talked back in October. The educators said this is the vision that we want to have for the district. Here's some ideas that we have. We're going to fold that in also to the analysis. When we go out to look at buildings, there are industry standards for how long things last, whether it's the air conditioning units or the flooring. And so we use that when we're out looking at those building systems. So this is, some things have a typical lifespan of, 15 years, some are a little bit longer. Typically, we like to see electrical, or try to get electrical 40 years. Some publications say 30, but most schools we do 40. Educational adequacy will be a term we'll talk about a little bit later. That has to do with how the building helps support the talents of the teachers. And so when we get into more detailed design, we talk about the functionality of the space, and I know y'all talked about that some, I think, in October. Specifically, there are things that we can look at that are countable or measurable, like the size of a classroom space. So here's basically East and South. Many of you know the original structure was the same footprint, floor plan. And so I kind of grouped a summary here, and then I know you all walked and toured last time, and so I'm going to show a few pictures, but I'm just going to give you the perspective that we see as engineers and architects when we go through, and you guys see other things, and I think y'all have mentioned that to Mike. But this is just a summary of things that we saw. There's some exterior issues out here I know you guys are aware of. Basically the interior finishes like the flooring, and even there's a hard ceiling that's above this ceiling, still original. You guys have had some HVAC and roof work done, so there's been things that have been done to help maintain the building. But there's a lot of things that have, the electrical systems are essentially original, or they were put in when some air conditioning was done, so years ago. So this is basically, we'll talk some about life safety for us. That's the exiting of the building. There's a smoke detector right here. A lot of times in school buildings, new school buildings will have a fire sprinkler system. We'll talk about the glass in the hallway, things like that. And then ADA accessibility. So we looked at a lot of things, but there's some significant needs, as you can see here, exteriors and interior wise. I mentioned just, this is actually the very small print, Harvard School, Chan Public School of Health, but they did a study about what affects kids' learning. And so a lot of these things, building-wise, safety and security, all the way up to ventilation, we have standards for that. There's a certain amount of fresh air that we need to bring into classrooms that's important for kids to learn. So just looking, I've kind of grouped pictures from south and north together, but when we see things like this in the paving, that's when we're starting to lose the base, the material that's underneath the paving. So that's a significant issue that's going to need to be replaced. This is actually out here in the back. You've got portables, so we know that you're short on some classrooms here. But even playgrounds, we look at for fall zone, for the surfacing, and for ADA accessibility. So in a new school, you'd have different standards for that we need to meet. This is actually over at South. This is the issue that TASB was talking about in their report. They've actually given that report to the board, but we went and looked. This is the library addition, I believe. Essentially, this is a metal building. This is not the same kind of conventional structure. This is a metal building portion that was added to that school in the early 80s. It's got there's a lot of drainage issues in that courtyard. That drainage is not good for foundation movement. So that's one of the things that's going on over there. So it would take dollars to fix that. I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. This is that issue I was talking about with the ramp. The good news is this addition, the building isn't moving, but all of the flat work around it has issues. So that's something, it's not affecting the walls here in the corridor, but it is affecting the access around the building. There's a good bit of grade out there, as you all know, that we have to deal with. This is the ramp down to the elementary gym. It's too steep for ADA purposes, so it really, you need to have something more like what you have on this to be accessibility. I don't know, have you guys seen, did you notice this when y'all are walking around? I don't want to hit them too hard. Just some more pictures of this older doors, the flooring that you can see. Further down the hall over there is this area here. Vinyl asbestos tile lasts a long time, and certainly the district has taken extra efforts to take care of it, but it is something that things still wear out. Keep going. Y'all saw this, I think, when y'all were walking, right? So y'all seen all that. Window. So when we look at a window, we're looking at more than just the condition of it. You've got some that are rusting around the edges, but we look at them. Some of them are painted shut. So they're not operable, and that's an exit, or it used to be. I consider now the code doesn't allow us to count that as an exit. But every classroom, if it doesn't have two exits, it's supposed to have a fire sprinkler system.
That's right.
Yeah. So we look at those things. So that's how we look at things, not just from stuff that's worn out. We look at it from a code issue. These are some, the doors are well worn, and we can't put transfer grills in doors anymore either, because that can allow the passage of smoke or in an exit passageway.
And Alan, we might just talk about the significance of this. When we design schools now, we are tasked with making sure the student in a classroom or in a certain space has a safe route out to the outside of the building, and there's adequate warning. Classrooms, as Alan mentioned, if you don't have a fire sprinkler or in fire alarm, then you've got to rely on that window as a means of emergency egress for students. We can't do that anymore. And so these are all code implications that really affect the life safety of the building's occupants. And those are some things that, you can fix those, but when you start paying to fix those things, then all of a sudden you have more things that you have to bring up to code, accessibility, and then you start looking at tornado structures and things of that nature that are expensive. And so you can use the term cascading effect. And that's one of the things that we see every time we design a building is we have to make sure we factor a lot of these things in. It's not just the windows, but there are many other systems that are impacted. And certainly, the occupants of the buildings, just like many other buildings at this age, they're just not designed to the standards now that, the code officials have really researched these things and based on things that have happened. And so that has really impacted the way we design schools now and things that we probably need to address when we look at repairing and additions and renovations.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, a lot of times, there are different triggers, but at a certain point of renovation, you've got to bring everything up to like new code. So when we go out, we're looking for things like that when we're assessing. This is just, the fixtures look great, but you can kind of see that they've been patched. The wall's been patched. So Mitch and his staff have had to go in at different times and go get to the plumbing that they can grab. Older plumbing, a lot of times, even when you're working on it, has a tendency to, if you've got cast iron in your house like I do, you get in, you work on it, it likes to split on you sometimes. So there's definitely plumbing issues, and it's original plumbing that you're dealing with in most cases. This is just the size of the classroom. The younger the age kid, the more space that you need. These classrooms are on the small side, and they're under the minimum size. So 650 is not big enough for a second grader. And if you've ever had to corral very many of them, you'd like to have probably 1,200 square feet. But basically, the code men or the TEA would say that's 800 square foot is what you need. So to accommodate that, you really need the classrooms to be bigger. Now, we've done that before. We had a project in Idlewood where we repartitioned the whole school to make them bigger and then added more classrooms to make up for the ones we lost. So it's possible to do that. I wanted to also point out, you can see the same condition here that's in the classroom. So most of the new schools that you'll find, or even new additions, will have 4 supply registers and 2 return. In the classrooms, you've got this. It's a supply and return both. So acoustically, it's one of those things I showed in the chart earlier. That's something that affects. So especially for my wife used to teach 7th grade. When she would talk, she'd come home hoarse. That's making it a little bit harder to communicate. And the other thing is that kids, we know acoustics matter in their learning. So we don't want them to hear every 3rd word or 2 out of every 3 words. We want to hear all of them. So because some kids are auditory learners. Electrical and fire safety. There's some rooms that have some additional plugs. My wife was teaching. Someday, when my wife was teaching, she taught at Well Slade in Lubbock. She had 1 plug on the front wall and 1 on the back wall. And there are a lot of classrooms here and at South that are in the same way. So this is how that gets addressed. I've had cases where this has caused problems. I was talking to Brian earlier about a school in Brownfield I worked on. That was an issue. The glass that's in the hallway, if we don't have a fire sprinkler, we can't do unrated glass of this amount in an exit passageway. So that's why we brought that up, and this isn't sprinkler.
Alan, isn't that glass also just float glass?
Yeah, it's
annealed glass. It's not tempered. And so if anything impacts that, you got shards falling everywhere, as opposed to a tempered where you get the little pieces, and it's a lot safer. And so these schools are full of the annealed glass.
Thank you. And then seeing now the roof's being addressed, but this is down the hallways, and you'll see it in the classrooms too. The ceiling tiles, and above that is we were up here above the ceiling out here the other day. There's a hard ceiling there too. That's a plaster, and that's expensive to take down, and it may have the same issues that you have here. So that's okay. It's encapsulated. We don't know yet, but that's another issue that's expensive to remove. Air conditioning wise, you got a lot of units that are newer. So in HVAC, like there are some like on this edition that are original to 2005. So if they last 20 years, which is a good life, or 22. So somewhere in the next 5 years, you'll need to be taking care of those, but it's not an immediate thing. I'll keep going. Kind of same thing. Here's some more plumbing. These units are newer. So you've got some that are very new. So you'll see that reflected in our cost chart. Electrical. So there, as I was mentioning before, you still have the original panels that were here when this was built. And you have some panels that were added when the air conditioning was done. Your fire alarm doesn't have, so now schools require a voice evacuation. So basically the fire alarm gives you commands. And so when you have a certain number of kiddos or occupants in a building, you have to have an audible system. So this has a speaker, but it doesn't have the ability to give instructions. And some more electrical pictures. Now you have had some lighting retrofits that have done. They basically took the old fixture and put in new ballast. That's been done. But anyway, those are kind of just, any questions? Do you guys see those things too that I saw? Were there any, did I miss anything you got a question about, or kind of know there's some physical issues? So what does it take to fix those things? We do an analysis now. What TASB did is they kind of look at what we would call a current year chart. What we do is we look at a current year cost, we look at the next 5, and then we look at 6 to 20. A lot of school districts we work with, they don't have the money to fix these in their general fund, so they have to do some kind of a bond to do a repair, or renovation, or addition. So it's a good idea to know what's coming before you do that. It helps you make some decisions. Just like anything, like if you were going to do something to your house, you would want to know what I have coming ahead. We look, I know it's real small print, but we look at different building systems. So we look at site, we look at utilities, we look at interiors, all the way down to electrical. So those are the things that were here when the building was built. Then we look at things that have changed since the building was built, code things, or modernization. So that's change to the size of the classroom, or it's a change to the fire code, or ADA accessibility. And so those things are listed down here. And then we total all those things up for the current year, and a lot of the building performance measurements, or the indices that Mike was talking about, they come from this number. When we look at comparing buildings, an inventory of buildings, if you will, across different time periods, it's helpful to have an index, because that way you can compare a building that we may have assessed 10 years ago, or you can compare another building in your inventory to each other. So they're really useful. All of the indices that we use in the building industry are related to the cost of repair divided by the cost of replacement. So if you've ever heard of the 50%, if it's 50% of the cost to repair versus a new one, you should replace it. Well, that's one of the measurements that we use, called a facility condition index. Different building organizations have that different threshold, whether it's some use 35, some TASB uses 45, we use 50%, but everybody has some kind of an index. So that's kind of the way, and I'm going to take you through the math on that. And I promise not to go too much in depth, but I'm an engineer and I like math. So one of the things you're going to notice, we have a replacement cost down here, and you may have fallen out of your chair like I do sometimes when I see the cost of the building sometimes, but let me take you through. So the building, in this case, we're looking at 33,000 square feet. We do use an escalation percentage for these out year costs. That doesn't affect this current year, but the white column is a current year, and then the yellow and blue column are those extended out years, and then this green one's the total 20 year. So we're going to focus on the white column. In the case of South, we're a little over 12 million in current year needs.
Can you zoom in on
Oh,
that?
yeah, hey.
I don't know if we can do that.
Oh, I did, yeah, hang on. I got to be more patient. Okay, let me try this. I feel like I'm Tom Cruise. Didn't he have a movie where he did that? Right. So, $12 million in current needs. So this is kind of the way it stacks up. And I'm going to talk about what the $4 million is here in adequacy, but up through electrical, so we have some life safety things, 500,000, ADA accessibility. We've got a lot of stuff to do. When you get into that, and you have to move walls around and make things accessible, that's expensive. This educational adequacy would be things like the classrooms that are too small, repartitioning your classrooms. When you do that, you have to add for classrooms because you're taking some away. So that's an example of what would be an ed adequacy. So when I get to the 12 million, now I'm comparing it to this 17 million as a. Told you I do math. I'm not good at this. All right. Mike, you want to be?
I don't know if I can do this or not.
I'm sorry. So, and I've got another slide that shows it's probably bigger, but so basically I'm going to be in the worst case measurement 12 million to 17. One of the measurements is going to stop here, and the other ones are going to use the total. So let me go on to the next slide, and I think it'll help. I don't want to get bogged down. There you go. All right, so I want to just mention. Appreciate that. Yeah, awesome. Look at that. Isn't it good? I like it. So this 516, does it cost $516 square foot? That's not the construction cost, is what I'm trying to say. I'm going to take you through where that comes from. That's a total cost with all the things that you have to do for a school. The other costs that you have to have. So that's not the total. That's a total cost, but I've got the same soft costs in here.
And we talked a little bit about that last month, what all costs were associated with the total.
Yeah.
The total budget. You know, there's all kinds of engineering fees and testing, furniture, IT equipment, all of those things come in to add to the cost of the building. When you see a building square footage, that cost, Alan, I think you would say is probably like the turnkey cost.
That would be the
of
turnkey,
everything.
and it's factored. All schools like to have that cost. The construction cost, what people hear when a contractor bids it, is more between the 400 and 410 for the purpose of this analysis. Okay, so don't think 500. This is what you would hear from somebody, a contractor. So looking at East, same analysis method. Now let me come back. I'm going to show all these measurements here. Okay. I've got a blow up of this in a minute. I forgot about, but essentially in current year needs at East here, a little over 11 million, and a little more square footage. So its indices, it performs better than does the South Elementary, and I'll show you the calculation here in a second.
Is that because of the new addition?
That's because of the new addition. So it actually scored better in these performance measurements because of the new addition. Let me go to the map. What's that? Yeah. So this kind of explains how we break it down, and I'm like I said, we use three measurements. The facility condition index is just what was here, the cost of repairing what was here when it was built to the replacement. And then this is the scale we use, the 50% we were just talking about. I would also say most of the time when we're talking, we wouldn't, if you have replacement recommended 2 or 3 of these measurements, then certainly you need to consider that, but it doesn't mean that you have to replace them. Then we have the other 2 measurements. This is the same exact calculation, except we're adding the extra fire safety, the changes that Texas Education Agency has, all those things. That's called the Condition Needs Index. TASB actually scored it based on this. So we have a similar measurement that they do. And then we got one that factors in the age. So this one's a little more detailed. But we got the question when we were working for the federal government. They were looking at transferring schools that they had operated to a school district like Breckenridge. The question was, when is something, how does age, because age doesn't factor into either one of these. So they have the concept of a useful life. In the government, they fund buildings annually. They call it sustainment, but it's to take care of the cost of operating and maintaining a building. And they do that on an annual basis. So this particular calculation just looks at what's the repair cost versus, in our case, the building age, 70 years minus the building age. So if you'd like to get 70 years out of an elementary, you're really close to that. That's the max that we would normally see. A lot of people replace schools after 50 years, but that is, we're trying not to overly tip the scale. Versus a facility replacement value over a full service life. So if those annual payments, if this ends up being more, and it's 125% more, then typically that's the scale for replacement. Am I getting too down into the weeds of numbers? I am. Thank you. Okay, we're going to skip through that. The gist of it is that at South Elementary, it's the just pure physical condition rates is poor. If you factor in all the changes that you're going to be required to do if you renovate, it's replacement recommended. TASB's number was 80%. Ours is 71. Same math. And then we're well over because the building is so close to being 70 years old. All right, East Elementary. I'm going to keep going. It performs better because we've got this new addition. 36%. I think TASB was 55 or 56% on this one. We're 59. So again, that's showing as poor but not replaced. There's portions of this that are very newer and in good condition. And then again, we're more than 125%. So we're over that threshold with those three. So it is, what do I do with all that information, Alan, is probably what you're asking, right? It's okay to go through that. Let's get through that. So I wanted to provide a slide that took all that information and showed you what other people have. So other people similar size. When you're lower in both of those first two measurements, districts, in this case, Tahoka Elementary, Tahoma, O'Donnell, they renovated. In Idlew, they did a combination of addition renovation, like I mentioned, which is kind of in that area where this building falls. This one scores a little bit higher. And then for those on this side of the chart, Seagraves, Plains, Forsan, Dimmitt, which I missed. No, I got it right. It's spelled right. They replaced. So that's more in line with where you are with South. We got this slide came from a board member because they said, well, what does everybody else do when they get, I got off into my numbers and they said, well, what does everybody else do? And that's just provided so you guys can see kind of where you rank. So East is here, South is there. Questions on that? I promise I'm going to get away from too many calculations. Make sense for you guys? Y'all are good? Okay. Another thing to look at, and I'm the data guy, so I'm just going to provide information. The school, you have probably heard, because I think we're headed to are we going for a fourth session now? Something like that? There's a lot of discussion about school finance, but one of the things that the legislature started talking about in the beginning was about the allotment or the what they give on a cost per student to school districts. This is just a scatter chart of everybody in your region that's 3A Division I. So basically all of your peer school districts. This is the size of their enrollment. And and this is the cost per student, annual cost per student. So South Elementary is in the $8,100 per student. There are some in your district that are less, some that you may go and play in football. So all this is just to show you that in Merkel they have a consolidated school. Peaster has one elementary. So Kermit has one. Brownfield has one. So there is there is an operational size of elementary school that works, or that is less per student, I should say. Typically, when you get a little bit larger, there are some operational efficiencies, if you will, with a larger elementary versus a smaller elementary, or even versus two smaller elementaries. This is just data, so take it for what it's worth. But East Elementary is actually doing pretty well in terms of that. But anyway, so there's lots of elementaries in your district. But show you that. Any questions on that slide? Still going good? Okay. Last thing on the chart that most people find helpful, I've graphed East and South Elementary together. So all those numbers that I had before, I put them on two lines. If you were going to compare renovating East and South Elementary, that's about $24 million in current year cost. 11.7 plus 12.3 or so, I think is what the numbers were. That's the blue line. By the time you get 20 years out, you're going to be to a replacement. The school will be 85 years old. So the blue line jumps when you need to replace it. The orange line is a ballpark of what that new, just what the square footage here of the main building and the square footage at South. Building new, 38 million. Well, we know that in 20 years you're still going to have to fix the floors. You're going to have to put more air conditioning units on. You're going to have to, some things are going to wear out. So that's what that jump is. But at the end of 30 years, which is usually what districts do for a bond, that's the difference, 66 million. So a lot of assumptions built into that, but that gives you an idea of what renovate versus replace is in one chart. I probably should have started with that instead of giving you a bunch of equations. Are there any math teachers in here? Please. Man, okay.
So Alan, that just for everybody's sake, the 66 million, that is that overtime, or is that
That's overtime, and that's got the cost of debt service and all those things. So you've got interest that's figured in there no matter what you do. So I ran them at the same rate. But I think the thing to keep in mind here is that if you think about it in terms of teacher salaries, that's a lot of money over 30 years. So it could do a lot that could be spent in the classroom as well. So
Could we get this email to us?
sure.
So
Yeah.
that I can print that out and look at it?
Absolutely.
To your budget charts for each
Absolutely. Yeah.
school and then-
Sure. Yeah, No, you're totally good, and I knew that I was.
I'm trying to scribble down numbers, but.
I'm happy to. We were thinking maybe just make a little kind of summary minutes, and we can just clip this chart straight from Bluebeam into a PDF. And all right, so I've got a few more numbers. Mike and Aaron and Kit do more of the drawing stuff. Let me talk about how we look at cost, and I'm going to just give you some historical data now. But basically, we have a checklist of things that we go through when we budget things. So there's construction cost, and then there's those other things that make up the cost of the building. I think Mike showed you some of this. I'm not going to. We get data from a lot of sources, is the gist. When you do stuff at your house, like I had to have done recently, I might call a plumber and they come out, and I can manage that myself as a homeowner. When we do a school project, typically you're going to have 35 to 45 different trades on a job, and they're going to be there periodically throughout the job site. Sometimes they're there all the time, sometimes they come and go. So there's a cost so that's why you have a general contractor or construction manager. And when they're on the job, they also have their own cost of labor and supervision. So all that together makes up a construction cost. And then we have other things that we need to do. We have to do utilities. We need to design it. If you do a bond, there's an attorney that does the underwriting. There's furniture, there's technology, there's security, there's all those things. Typically that can add up to 20 or 25% more. So when you saw that, when I said, hey, it's not 500 a square foot, that's when it filters through from the construction cost all the way through and it has these markups on it. But every school project that you see has the same kind of cost. So, makes sense?
Do we need to enlarge any of this for y'all
Yeah.
in the back, just to see if I can do this?
Pretty good. Okay. The
Utilities. Phasing is one of the things I think is really interesting. Renovation projects, additions are a little bit more expensive because of the phasing. We've got to keep kids in classrooms. And so if we're going to renovate a wing, we've got to take all of those kids out of that wing and put them in portables. And so that lengthens the contractor's time, costing the district more money, but you also have to find a place to put those students in other temporary buildings. One of the things that we always hate to see is, everybody's paying for temporary buildings that are going to be gone. But it may be just a simple fact of life of how you get something accomplished. But it's a little bit less efficient because you're paying for things that are not really necessarily related to the building. So I just wanted to kind of point that out, the importance of phasing there and the cost.
As y'all look at different options, and Mike and his team look at different options, when we go put cost to that so that you have some big picture costs to compare, we'll include phasing impacts. Go back to, you guys saw this chart last time, but it's just an example of, it's that same chart. I just wanted to show you, this is Mike's chart, that's the other one with my chart. So we're talking the same language here, but this is what you guys saw at the last meeting, broken down. If you did a $20 million project, that's kind of how.
That's that turnkey cost, that the district is going to pay for any type of a project. And then there's construction, and then there's the soft costs that are the fees, the pre-construction costs, with contractors and estimating and things like that. If you do CMAR, post-construction, there's testing and things like that. The building is just this little part right here out of that 20 million. There's also the site, utilities, bringing utilities, paving, things that we don't necessarily know at this moment, but they are a significant impact. Types of soil, is it soil that is very expansive, causing your foundation to move? You've seen some of these transitions at wings where you've got a little different floor elevation, the cracks in the masonry. All those things are very important. Pad prep, parking and things like that, all are added to the cost of the building.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about things that affect construction costs. You just touched on the type of soil. There are things that you have to do with the school that I don't have to do if I'm doing something at my house. One is the energy code. That's something we're required to follow, and each year it gets more strict. So, now we have to put in lights in schools that will automatically dim when the sun's out, or if there's natural light coming in. There's lots of other things we have to do. In this area, you're in a 250-mile-an-hour wind zone, so that requires a storm shelter now, based off of what's happened in Moore, Oklahoma, and even, down the road in Jacksboro, we have more districts talking about that.
And that's whether you're doing an addition or you're building a new facility. If we're going to do a classroom addition, that classroom addition's got to be tornado rating.
If
So
we're
it's gonna
doing,
have a higher cost per square foot just to meet that requirement.
it's any new construction, basically. So then we have just the amount of labor. So we make calls to subcontractors, major contractors in the area. I just spoke to one last week. And then site specific, this could be the soil conditions, it could be the access to utilities and things like that. So those things are what make that cost of a school. All right, I'm going to show you a ton of data real quickly. And then we can provide more of this stuff as a follow-up. But so Breckenridge is in Region 14, ESC 14. It is the furthest east, so that's Abilene Service Center, Educational Service Center. Breckenridge is as far east as Region 14 goes. It borders Region 10. Region 10 and 11 is Dallas, Fort Worth. So this is what the cost trend has been from 2013 to 2023. This is just, I mean, I know when we think about building houses, you think about cost per square foot. We use a cost per square foot just as a big picture. So for high-level budgeting, it's a good tool. When you get into doing an actual project, you're going to want to do more detail. But over time, back in 2013, 2014, you could build something for $150 to $165 a square foot under regular soil conditions, things like that. Recent bids in the Dallas area are in the 360s. One of these similar school districts has one that has bad soil. It's in the 419. Most of these aren't our projects. These are data we've got from contractors. So most of these are not ours. So that's kind of where the market has gone over time. There were some projects in the 2020 timeframe. Everybody was worried about having work. They were a little bit less. I told you I used this for another district that had a bond election, and we were trying to figure out what we should set the amount for a new elementary school. So this is you're also bordering Region 15, which is San Angelo, and Region 18, which is Permian Basin. Region 16 is in the Panhandle. It runs really high. It runs more like 15. This is a high area. So this line is all the data that I had from their regions. And some of these here are two of our projects in San Angelo. So 400 a square foot is kind of what we were using to base. So that's another way of looking at it. I try to get as much historical data as I can and try to call as many people. This is Region 14. We did Snyder Elementary in 2006. This was one of Mike's projects. So he was in the $125 square foot range back then. And this is how things have kind of progressed. I put the dates on here. Like I said, these green ones are ours. The blue ones are not. I put in New Deal because I just heard about this one. They're in Region 17, but most recent data I had, that's from a contractor actually 2 days ago. Chip got it. So this is kind of the trend even in Region 14. So if you think about how things escalate moving forward, that's kind of where we get to more 400 square foot. That's the way things have been moving. A lot of data. I'm sorry. So I put this chart in. This probably, again, may have been helpful to start with this one and not so much of the data. Apologize. And this is just a big picture. In the Austin area, it's the most expensive. They have Samsung, they have Tesla, they have a ton of other things. So their availability of labor, they've had schools already bidding in the 410s last year. So that's kind of the area range that we've seen. And this, again, is just big picture. Construction cost. Again, this is just a chart I use sometimes to communicate. People say, well, how much is escalation? We know things escalate. Fortunately, things have kind of slowed down. We were running in the 1% per month, higher than that in some places. the last I visited, it's running between 0.4 and 0.5% per month in escalation. So things it's just like the cost of everything. So when we do budgets, we use a process, as I said. So, we'll keep going. You might say, well, what about renovation projects? How much are those? Is it better just to renovate? Well, this is just pure. So these are districts where we've done renovation and new construction at the same time. So depending on where we are, it runs between, let's say, 40 and 60%. So if it costs $400 to build new, it's going to cost $200 to do a comprehensive renovation probably. We just did some budgeting in a district, 2 districts east of here, and I was running between 175 and 200. I sent my estimate to a contractor, and they confirmed that was the right ballpark. So none of this is. These are big picture things, but in all of these districts, we had new construction, and then we had renovation on another campus, similar kind of campus at the same time. So this is what this is back in 2013 in Abilene. We had early childhood center renovation. We had one that was new construction, 54% order. That's actually middle school project, I believe. We had a renovation and we had new construction. So that's the percentage renovation was of new construction in those districts. And that's actually long and Abilene. Okay, that's a good time to pause. I'm almost to the end. You guys are probably like, hey, it's about time. That's enough numbers. Does that make sense? Are there any questions on that I've already taken up almost an hour. So, it's hard to absorb. When I started doing schools in the late 90s, tracking costs, we had some that were $76 square foot, $85 square foot. Everything's changed over time. Last thing I was going to leave you with was I was asked, there was some discussion about compression and tax rates and how that kind of stuff works, how a district's total tax rate looks. I'm not the financial advisor. I've been in several meetings where I've been with them. So I'm going to cover just real quickly the basics of tax rates. And if you got your bill, if you've studied it, you may know this, but school districts have 2 parts of their tax rate. There's a maintenance and operations side of the tax rate. That's what's been a lot of discussion. All these special sessions and things like that the legislatures have been centered on this side of the tax rate. Maintenance and operations pay for the classroom equipment, the desks, the teacher salaries and paraprofessionals and so forth, the books, and paying the utilities to keep lights on. Typically, for most school districts, 70 to 80%. In some districts, as high as 85% in that category. That is teacher salaries. That's what that's supposed to say. Staff makes up 70 to 80% of the budget. So this is the rate. When you heard about compression, which they've done, that's the rate they're talking about. On the other side is the debt service tax rate. That's been 50 cents per $100 for as long as I've been doing schoolwork. That revenue, so there's districts that are property wealthy and there's districts that aren't. That particular side of the tax rate can't be touched. So the legislature isn't going to go take revenue from that side because you're servicing a debt. That can be used for construction, and in limited cases, buses, technology, there are rules that go with that. So we're going to talk more about compression. What the legislator's been talking about. This has happened over time. This is the maintenance and operation. So it's the left side that I was talking about before. In 2006, there was compression, and they cut that $1.50 per $100 valuation by a third. So basically down to $1, a little over $1. Districts could do what they call a tax ratification election and increase up to 13 more cents. So a lot of districts went from $1.50 to $1.04 to $1.17. In 2019, they compressed it again from $1.04. Most people were in the 96, 97 cents per $100 valuation. And then most recently, they did it again this session. Decreased, I think some districts were 70. It depends. There's different rules now, but a lot of districts are, in your district is in like 75, 76 cents per 100. I'll show it to you in a chart of just, this is Breckenridge ISD, and I hope the colors are okay, but green is the actual adopted tax rate the district adopted. So back in 2005, they adopted $1.50. What I'm showing here is the total capacity. The district could have levied 50 cents for interest and sinking, which is the debt service. They didn't. That was available. They didn't because you didn't have a bond. You did. In 2006, you can see I show the compression. Excuse me, 2007. Here's when the compression hit. You can see the district went to $1.04. They did have debt service, a small amount, can't remember, 6 or 7 cents. I'm trying to remember. And then they didn't have the blue is that additional maintenance and operation. They could have been at $1.17. They weren't. They were at $1.04. So the green represents what the district actually levied, and the blue and the gold represent what would be the state maximum. Does that make sense? So green is actual, blue and gold is what the district didn't tax it. And you can't levy a debt an INS tax rate without having a debt. So in this case, they were servicing a small amount of debt. You were servicing debt with a small amount of the tax rate. They didn't use the full capacity. They didn't use 50 cents. They were using 6, 7, 10 cents per 100. So anyway, this is but what this shows you is the total tax rate over time. And so you've seen it, the compression I talked about before in 2006, 2007. That was when they brought in the franchise tax and things like this. If you had a business, 2011 is when the state was $5.3 billion short for education, and so that made things kind of tenuous. Since then, we've had more the valuation. There's been excess collection in the valuation, so they've compressed the tax rate again. So today, this green tax rate is 76 cents, not $1.50 per 100. So what the district uses to fund teaching salaries, keep the lights on, not $1.50 per 100, it's 76 cents. So if we go back one, and so the maximum that the district's tax rate would be over here in the $1.30-ish range, not $2. That's a lot. I promise I'm done. So does that make sense? Is it helpful at all? Okay. I know it's a ton of data, and we did pretty good getting through all of it. So, okay. Is there any questions I could answer? Probably a follow-up was just the basic summary charts, maybe not all the charts, right? Okay. All right, Mike, I'm going to stop.
Alan, I know you apologized several times for the data, but this is so critical in helping you make decisions because there are some opportunities, there are some challenges, and then, that's what we're going to work through in the next couple of months is where is that direction that you all feel is right for Breckenridge ISD.
And you're going to have, the district has a financial advisor who will go in, who will come and talk in more depth. This is just like a introductory slide.
Alan's kind of our expert at this, but the district does have Live Oak is the name of the company. John Blackburn is the guy that will be out, and we're going to have him kind of tell you the same kind of thing, but it's spun a little bit differently. But it'll let you kind of know, what the opportunities, the impacts to the citizens. That's something that obviously you all want to know as you're talking about this in the community. You all want to know what that impact is. You need to have data And he's going to kind of start fleshing that out just a little bit for everyone. We're looking at projects. He's looking at ways that you can possibly fund them if you choose to move forward with projects. I'm not going to read through all these, but I think, we talked about getting a mailer or something out to you all that basically has this information. Remember last time we met with the educators and we met with the committee as well, you all, and we had you kind of go tell us what you felt like you must have, what you'd like to have, and what you needed to avoid. And so we kind of captured some of that. Of course, I'll just kind of read through some of the highlights. Safety and security, all students under one roof. That's a big deal for security. They wanted a new elementary school. Design modern, but keep it traditional. One of the things I did here is you don't really need anything extravagant. We need something that is very functional, healthy, energy efficient. And so those are things that we heard. Natural daylighting, wanted to have one library, not decentralized. I think there was a lot of interest in the collaborative spaces, the learning neighborhoods where you have classrooms around small group rooms where you might get 8 students in and an educator, or 4 students, and then maybe a space where you can pull students from all the classrooms out and work with them to catch them up or to put them on special projects and just let them learn faster if they can. Some of the things to avoid: the decentralized library, portables, focus on sports, interesting, pick up and drop off in the residential road or a main road. One of the things that we always like to do is provide more space, because we've been through your drop offs and we've observed, especially at South, very minimal. I'm sure at the end of school every day you've got traffic out in the streets for parents that queue up and they're waiting for their kid to come out. Well, we always try to get that off the roads as much as possible, and also to kind of help distribute that load where you might have parents coming in and dropping off. You may have deliveries and service and buses in another area, and maybe educators can park in another parking lot and have access. But by doing that, you kind of separate that traffic, and it really does kind of minimize those clashes where you have a student running across, where you have buses trying to leave and things like that. So from the committee, safety and security, we did hear the same thing with new elementary school, new playground equipment, teacher resource areas, places for parents and teachers to meet, junior high renovations, high school renovations, classrooms with the connected toilets, new cafeteria, new band hall, new CTE spaces, utilities and things like that. And so that's just kind of a quick idea of what you all said to us when we start thinking about, facilities, whether it's renovations or if it's a new facility. And again, I will send this information out to you. So what are we going to be doing in December, January, and February? So December, we're going to have the financial advisor, John Blackburn, come out and kind of speak to you all to just talk about various scenarios. We'll review maybe a project list of costs. That we can look at that from the terms of these amounts that Alan presented to you to repair your buildings and to get them up to code. We can also start looking at, how big does a new facility need to be? And then we can kind of talk about, what is the budget for something like that. If that's a direction you want to look at, we'll discuss the funding options based on those scenarios. And we'll talk with, John Blackburn will kind of help with that. And then we might start prioritizing. Today, before we leave, I might just ask you guys, we'll take a few notes. After hearing this and after hearing the conditions of the schools, what would you like to see done? We're not focusing on solutions yet, but we're looking at things that you can kind of weigh the cost and the impact on the taxpayers and the citizens. And we can start analyzing those things, and you can look at them and say, well, this is too much, or this just doesn't take care of enough of the needs. But those are things that we want you all to do. John Blackburn's going to kind of help with those decisions along with us, and trying to decide how big these projects may be. In January, we might have Live Oak come out and kind of give the final of the impact of what you all decide are the projects, and for each one. And then you can probably pick what projects you want that you feel like are within the budget that you feel comfortable with. Or maybe you don't feel comfortable with it. But either way, we want to make sure that you have a list of projects that you can fit within your budget. We'll look at options and the costs. We'll prioritize projects, and then we'll probably start looking at block diagrams of, where would we put an addition at? How big is the new school? We can kind of come up with a footprint for that. And we can look at, maybe some examples of what we've done before that are traditional schools, very economical schools versus schools that want something that want to push the envelope with. And then in February, we'll probably, before you make a recommendation to the school board, we will one more time look at our concepts and our costs. And it's kind of that moment where everybody agrees, this is what we want to do, this is the direction we want to take, this is what we feel like it needs to cost. We need to be within these parameters. And if there's anything that we need to change, we're certainly going to do that before someone from this group hopefully makes a recommendation to the school board on the 12th, which I believe is the last date we'll check that, to call an election for May. So those are some important dates to remember. So the election that we're working toward is May of 2024, and we'll have to call that election in February. The board will do that. These are just some things that Chip did. If we were to take the classroom deficiency in square footage and we expand by repartitioning all these classrooms to get them up to Texas Education Administration standards, you're going to have to repartition, but what that means is you're losing classrooms in here, so we're going to have to take care of that by adding 2 classrooms, maybe 3 classrooms on each wing. Same thing here. But to take care of the temporaries in this building and in this building, there's 12 of them. An addition would be about that size right there. So we're kind of taking up a lot of area. We're encroaching out into the playgrounds, but we haven't really figured out a way to take care of the traffic. And so those are some things that we'll kind of look at in a little bit more detail. This is a decision that we need to kind of work towards. We've got a little bit of a different scenario at East. We've got a huge transition in grade. We've got a drop off out there. And so that's something that we're going to have to work around. We'll have to bring in dirt cost, believe it or not, to kind of bring that building up to the elevation. Or we're going to have to spend a lot of money in concrete ramps to take care of these additions. Of course, we want to try and do what you all asked, so everything to be under one roof or connected. And so the PE room would obviously need to have some kind of a connecting corridor so we don't have students that are going outside then back into, and that's something that security, it's one of the primary things that they want students to stay within that building at all times and not have to go outside. So just for instance, for the enrollment that we've been talking about, 750 students to maybe 800 if you want to grow. TEA standard classroom sizes, 800 square foot for the younger grades, 750 square foot for, I think, 3rd through 5th or 6th, if you keep 6th there. Art room, music room, a PE gym, which probably would be your tornado shelter, a central library, cafeteria, assembly area. Similar to this, you may have a stage or something in your cafeteria, administrative suite, and again, 750 to 800 students is roughly about 95,000 to 105,000 square foot. That's just a range. And that's without having the educators' input on what this facility needs to have in it. That 95,000 to 105,000 could change one way or the other. But by the time we have a recommendation, we are going to know what that number is, because we're going to work with the educators and we're going to determine, well, how many classrooms do you need? Because we know 26 classrooms at South, 26 classrooms at East does not mean you have to have 52 classrooms. We're going to, adjust the sizes of them. We need to tell how big that library needs to be based on the standards, the library standards, security. Nowadays, you got to have, IT closets and, your main equipment, things of that nature. Fire sprinkler, riser rooms, things that these facilities don't have that are a little bit more square footage, but the efficiency would be probably, you would be more in the range of 34 classrooms to 36, we would estimate, to take care of that enrollment, just based on scenarios that we've designed in the past.
One of the things, Mike, you might just mention that the other thing we've seen change a lot, I think I'm using the intervention grouping spaces or there's other spaces in a school smaller than classrooms that you need now for.
Yeah.
If that's the right word.
Half classrooms.
Interventions, dyslexia specialists, speech therapy, all those kind of
Yeah.
ancillary services.
Yeah, that's right. So there's some different spaces that are in schools that we need to make sure.
And you guys have heard of makerspace. I mean, you guys had makerspace talks, so that's another thing that we're seeing across the board. It's great for kids who learn in different ways, and it gives
Kids
teachers
that learn by doing versus by listening
Yeah.
and reading. We're trying to respond to all different types of learners. Those maker spaces, Alan, I know your son was always one that just really thrived in that space. I think most of us architects and architecture students, that was very much the way we learned, just by doing stuff and drawing things. So I can really appreciate those spaces, because you can do all kinds of things. You can build, you can construct things, you can solve various types of problems in a different way in those types of spaces. So that's really all we have. I just wanted to kind of leave the last few minutes before we go to, number one, make sure you all understand some of the data that we've talked about, the impact that it has on your decisions. We really want to make sure that when we give this information to you, that if you do have any questions, relay them back to Mr. Allen. He'll forward them to us, and we can answer any of those questions that you may have. It's really critical in your decision making as we move forward.
You guys have some questions?
Yeah, are there any questions?
So we focus on South did want to discuss the hospital today about it.
Well, one of the things that we did look at in high school, Alan, I know you walked with one of the things that our biggest concern is and I know Tasby had selected that.
Yeah.
High school.
I've got the number.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, they're rated on that top four for a reason. There's a lot of physical needs, and I think so like here we got on the roof, we went in all the electrical rooms, same thing at South. There we walked through, but we didn't do a detail, but basically we had TASB's report, and we were looking through, and like I said, once we got through these, things were, we weren't exactly the same. We weren't seeing all exactly the same things. But over there, the vocational classrooms, and they're running in the vocational band, that same metric where we were saying 71% at South, they're 74%. They had 80% at South, 74% for vocational band. We said 71, and we did not do a full detailed workup like we did on health.
definitely. So what they're still pretty close, or we're pretty close to them, whichever. So I feel like probably they're in the right ballpark with their.
So we all have a report that's like on there.
They have a summary report that, yeah, they've done, but they went through they did every building. So there's actually a way for Mr. Allen can get in and look at all those buildings. But yeah, I've got their summary chart. I just exported it to Excel. So, yeah.
What are your thoughts? It just hit us immediately with spam, and then some of the classrooms are larger than they should be.
I mean, like, I'm teaching junior high, but it's all together, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all one location, but, you know, the portables, the cafeteria, the band hall. I mean, our cafeteria, you go inside, I mean, you're straight out of the 1950s. Like, it is mind-blowing how, you know, just how old everything is, but, just all of that up there. You know, from the classrooms, I mean, the classrooms are no different as far as the electrical to the windows to the, you know, I mean, we still experience the same thing. So that's just what I wondered if it was still a consideration, you know, as far as what we were looking at.
Yeah, well, and so, we didn't really expand upon Patty's report.
Right.
We'll look at it more,
Yeah.
because of your concerns. One of the things that we knew immediately was just those ones that were, you know, we really do band hall and CTE. Band hall's probably going to be the CTE, you know, it's obviously, there's so much more that you can do in there that new programs are fitting into these spaces. That it's probably compromising some of that, but, you know, just the safety and equipment.
Yeah.
We can sure look at that.
Yeah, we did install all that, and then, like I said, the electrical and the windows, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I just wondered. I mean,
Well, hey, and I think that's part of what this group is going to decide
Yeah.
is, hey, what projects are we, like I said earlier, what projects are we going to do now? And what projects do we need to prioritize in 5 years? You know, because, hey, I'll be honest with you. I mean, you can look around and you start thinking about the pricing that we're talking about. Hey, we're not going to be able to do everything all at once. You know, so you know, we're going to have to come up with some kind of long-range plan to address all the different needs. And hey, unfortunately, not everything's going to be done in the next 3 years, you know.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of this process. We don't want to leave anything out. We need to have everything on the board and everything, you know, front of mind, because that's where you really mess up is if you start prioritizing things and you got a big black hole over here that doesn't even get considered. You're going to find yourself in some trouble in 10 years because that's going to be pushed aside when it should have been part of the overall plan. So.
That's part of what, when we say we're doing a master plan, we look at it as not just what we're doing today or next year, but we're looking 5 years out, 10 years out, because we all know, you know, there's more needs. Alan, what was that total amount that TASB had for the
It's over
needs?
76.
76 million. That's a huge amount that obviously something's going to have to move out. Something else that we looked at when we walked through was the junior high location of the administration, and maybe there's better places where we can put it. Is there an opportunity to swap those places, or does that require new construction? So that's some things that we're also kind of looking at too. But one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to pair these things with price. And we're going to let you all vote and just see what those projects are that fit within.
I think that's kind of what we wonder, you know, just seeing, you know, like legitimately, what does it cost?
Yeah.
What does that one area?
Yeah.
So because the junior high, so because they weren't listed in that top four, does that mean based on that report that shows to be our best school, or is it just not? I mean, I'm not saying
No, I
it,
think
you
it's
know.
not as much of a need, as, you know.
Yeah, it's
So it's possible that this bond, maybe an elementary school and then redoing some stuff at the high school, like all in one? It wouldn't have to be a separate thing, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously want to try and get as many things into this opportunity because, you know, like Alan said, everything's escalating at what, a 0.5% a month, you know, 5.5 to 6% a year inflation. So you do want to kind of do as much as you can, because in 5 years, it's going to be a lot more. And so these projects that we're talking about here, we can identify, you know, what we can do is to do electrical throughout the building, new finishes, new cafeteria, kitchen cafeteria type thing. Those are things that we can look at to put pricing to, and we'll put them on that list, and that will help everybody just know what we're talking about total dollar wise.
We'll bring you an example of another, so what you asked about, we'll have a list with the rough overall project cost, and then a column, and so what we done in like Littlefield, Aaron did a great job converting their old high school to their junior high, and we got good numbers when we bid it. So we were able to do a little bit more than what was in the bond, but we had prioritized that with the Citizens Committee. So the next project that was on the list, so they had some items that were for a future bond. But we were able to do more renovation in that existing school, but just because of the way the bids worked out. And so the nice thing about the process is that you're going down, I mean, these are things that everybody's talked about, and if something happens and you can do it, you can do it. To answer your question about the junior high, there are a lot of needs listed. The reason we did elementary is because South was at the very top of their list, so we ended up, and since it was the same footprint, we did this one too. So
I have a random kind of question. It's about the combo elementary where you have all these kids together. I mean, do you have multiple gyms, multiple cafeterias? Like, how does that? How do you feed 800 kids lunch
that's a
within
fantastic
2
question.
hours or something?
Yeah.
Yeah. And go to PE. How do you go to PE every day with 800 kids in your building?
So
One of the things we'll have to do is, we've got the schedules from your schools to kind of help us kind of look a little bit at how you're doing that now. But there may be some things that you can look at schedule-wise that may open up opportunities. But, you know, your gymnasiums, the cafeterias that we're designing are obviously much bigger than this multiple serving lines. So, you know, for, I don't know if we've got, let me see, we've got am I going the wrong direction? Yeah. Okay. We've got an example plan that is it's this school right here is about, it's almost 90,000 square feet, I think. It serves 750 students. Yeah.
once you talk, and I'll find it.
Okay. And so it is all about how you schedule, but it's also, you know, it's a 74-foot long court, it's basketball. Bleachers in there, you know, pre-girls bleachers, so you get the parents inside. You have a community that uses it for games and things like that. But it's also big enough to where you can, yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, we've got a full basketball court, not a 94-foot long court like you would have in high school, but a 74-foot long court with, you know, the four square and then rows of bleachers and then dining. It's almost 4,000 square feet. That's quite a bit larger than this. But there's also 2 serving lines that serve it as well. And so one of the big problems is just getting those kids through that serving line. But we don't have the furniture showed in dining. But that school adequately serves 750 plus students. That's kind of, you have bigger spaces. One of the things that we do is also put a gym curtain in so you can divide that by, you know, groups of grades. The younger kids can use it, the older kids can use it at the same time. We did a school in Dimmitt, where we divided the entire cafeteria. And for that reason, 2 serving lines for, you know, pre-K through 2 and then 3 through 5. They wanted to separate those kids. And so we had a curtain or actually a folding partition, a acoustic folding partition that you could separate those kids. That was their number one concern, was mixing those age groups. Do they do that now? No. But they can. If it ever becomes a problem, there was something that was going on that was probably more related to the size of the cafeteria that they had at that time that was creating problems, and that by giving them a bigger classroom and multiple serving lines, that in itself probably took care of whatever their concerns were, so they don't really feel like they have to use that.
This one they have maker spaces here, one for every 2 grade levels, right?
Yeah.
And then they have their intervention spaces, I guess they're right in here. They have those spaces that Mr. Allen.
Yeah, the blue
was talking about,
spaces.
The blue ones.
Yeah, dyslexia, these are pull-outs. We have counselors that are located here. SPED is kind of intermingled within the classrooms, so it's a little bit more integrated. Sensory rooms, reading specialists and speech, and those areas there. And then,
This is the way that the teachers, we actually did a bunch of this during COVID via Zoom and some in person. But this is the teacher's plan. This is what we had a schedule and we put different ideas down, but this is what they came up with this. So works really well for them. Do we have a picture, Mike? Is there one? That's not. I don't think we have a picture. We'll bring pictures next time of what it looks like. It's very, very energy efficient, very economical plan, but also very nice inside.
Have you gotten feedback on how it is to drop off 800 kids at one time and pick up that many kids
Yeah.
at one time, and
One of the-
how that works?
It's like a big town.
That's what they do in the city all the time.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
we have
I'm just throwing out there what people are gonna, what people are gonna have.
Well, everybody in this town
That's
freaks out that
everybody's
there's
concern.
traffic at
Yeah.
4:30 and it's like nothing compared to
Yeah.
that. But
So when I talk about dispersing the traffic types, we've got a parent drop off here, and that queuing space, that's 2 lanes right there. So one of the things that really clogs these drives up is just having 1 lane where people are constantly waiting behind that one parent that is taking 10 minutes to get their kids out. You know, you can bypass them. So everybody's going to drop their kids off at this point because that's where the front door is. Most parents will wait until they get there and not here. And so we want to make sure that if there are those parents that drop off back here, they can bypass. But there's probably 40 cars in each lane that we can get stacked in that lane. That's a lot of cars, not to mention visitor parking up here. That's something that we want to make sure we provide. Parking that's dedicated to visitors, parents that want to just park on site, that feel like they want to come in. Bus drop off, we've got 8 buses there. They come in, they can come right into the cafeteria if they want to stay there, or they can go into the gym up here. More staff parking.
Did y'all have, I saw, was there something that sparked with this?
oh no, we were talking. I'm sorry, we were talking about junior high kids taking 18 minutes to get out of the car.
That's not an exaggeration.
It's the junior kids.
We do not need to get that. Just go ahead and
Like,
turn
push
your
like
camera back around.
Well, and we really do have, because your campus at the high school in junior high, you've got a lot of high school students that are driving.
Yeah.
And you've got a lot of people walking around.
Yeah.
And that, that's one of the things that we regularly, that's, not sure how you can fix that, but, a lot of times we do completely reroute, traffic, and that's some things that if we need to, we can study that.
The question you had about the number of gyms, you asked about gyms and cafeteria serving. So what Mike we have found, kind of between that 750 and 800 is about the size of campus that if you have one large gym like that, you can make it work. If you're in a 900, we have some districts because of their funding, they can't afford, like some of them showed in Clint, they have to be bigger. You can't do that with one gym. You guys know that with the schedule. You can't schedule that out without having more. So that's why we were kind of showing that if you get in that size range, which it looks like if just based off of that TEA data we were looking at, you're kind of in that range where it might work, just having one. We did an elementary in Monahans, and they have actually two gyms because they're more in the 900. So
But that's possible, but cafeteria, you definitely need more than one serving line. You can't do it with this one serving line. Because you can get 4 or 5 kids through per minute. That's not enough time, even if you start them at 10:30 to get them all through. So.
Yeah, there's that point where you do need to have 2 gyms.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Funding wise, do they still do Robin Hood?
If you're a property wealthy district, but
Yeah, I know, like Winkler County was always giving money to other districts and stuff. I mean, is that something?
So they've changed it a little bit. You don't send it directly to another district anymore. You send it to the state, and then the state distributes it out to the others. If your
Oh, it just
property,
does it to all of, like, it's not like a apply for,
no, you don't have to, like the
grant
old
kind of
days, you had to
situation.
specify, hey, we're gonna send our money to, Breckenridge ISD.
right? Can we
Okay.
get Winkler County?
Yeah, they don't do that anymore,
I
so,
know, we need to do some questions that way. We got too many people from that area that,
so
I'll make a phone call.
Yeah.
that have changed from that order when we started working with them. They were not property wealthy. They've got agri and they have a fertilizer plant now. They are considered property wealthy, but in terms of debt service, so that's the maintenance and operations side. They can recapture but on the debt service side, if you decide 10 cents to 50 cents, they can't take that revenue because you're having to service the debt. So 100% on the debt service side, 100% of the tax revenue that you have stays in Breckenridge. It can't be used. Now there are funding programs for districts that are not property wealthy, and when we started in Borger, they got what was called existing debt allotment, which helped them make their debt service payment. That has to be rolled forward by the legislature every 2 years. So there are some debt assistance programs for districts that aren't property wealthy. But irregardless, the state cannot recapture off the debt service tax rate, only the maintenance and operations side. Yes, sir.
There's no doubt that the facilities are sort of tired, and there's a lot of health and safety issues that we need to improve to make it a better environment for the teachers to teach and stuff. But is there any data that we can show people in the community that because of a renovation or a bond issue like this, the impact that has had on learning and the educational, what do you call it, the adequacy and that sort of thing?
Yes,
So I think a lot of people are going to ask that too. They know we got to fix things up because they're so old.
Yeah.
But as a result of this, how's it going to improve the success of the students? And make it better for the teachers to teach in, obviously, but then is there any data where we can show the impact on the learning of the students?
That's a fantastic question. We talk in our firm about maximizing the impact on learning and lowering the cost of operation. Didn't put that slide in here, I don't think, but I'll just tell you, so Seagraves is a district I worked with, going back to 2012. They were in a 1949 building. The tightness of those classrooms, I think it was here that you were nodding your head, I think, when I said, hey, it's hard to teach it. They had that same problem. They were trying to do, so when I go into class, I volunteered in a pre-K classroom last week, and that was wild. But it was fun, but wild. There's kids that are on a listening station. There's kids with the paraprofessional, there's kids with the teacher. There are kids just working on their own with blocks and stuff on the, this case it was snap together shapes. And so there's all kinds of stuff happening. It's very difficult to do that in 650 square foot with that kind of space. It's hard to manage the classroom. They had that problem there. So they were working with a group called the Schlepke Center for Professional Development at the same time. And so we ended up doing a new elementary for them. And I know that writing was up 14% and reading was up 8%. And I would love to, I'm not going to stand here and take credit though for what, there's nothing, so I'll say it this way, there's nothing that replaces a highly qualified teacher in a classroom. But the building can get in the way of things, I think, like what you were saying, and that was what was happening there. And so they have it now to where their teachers can plan together. They have
small spaces where they plan lessoning, like, right, and yes, collaborate
And
and,
you can attract more highly qualified teachers with that,
yes,
which would help.
and so it worked out now. I need to circle back. It's been some years ago, but I know I mean, you can measure it in different ways. We did a school in Abilene, and what they were happy about was we put more reading materials they had a hub space, so we put reading materials, grade level readers there. They had space to do it. We didn't do it. They did it. But their million word reader program, that's how they were measuring success. More kids were doing that. But we do have graphs that show kind of before renovation or addition or new and after and in between. But we're very much focused on those kind of things. We're also interested in protecting, newer schools. There's the Purcell Elementary in Abilene. Their energy consumption, Chip, was way lower replacement school versus a new. So that's money that you can put back. It's like 40-something%, wasn't
They
it?
cut back, they cut their energy savings by close to 60%.
Because they had windows like this.
Is
and,
that the old Johnston?
it's the old Johnston.
So we showed you that's the one that had the outdoor garden that the students designed. We had the tanks that we harvested rainwater, which someone commented they would like to do here. But yeah, that's those facilities, when you look at the old trend for the cost of utilities, heating and cooling versus what it is now, it's really amazing at how much money just doing that saves in your Function 51 costs.
I'm just really glad that you asked that question, because what started Seagraves was a couple of teachers wanted to take out a wall. They had this old school, they wanted to take out a wall because they wanted to team teach or co-teach or whatever. And so that's what started that, and I think that's the way they wanted to teach and use the building. So our job is to get the building out of the way, so that if there's something that y'all need to do at the campus level, so like this Plainview one is what reflected what they needed to do, what they wanted to do.
So I was just thinking, so as your energy efficiency goes up, your M&O would go down.
Yes, absolutely. That's part of, so in O'Donnell, it was, we actually, so sometimes we'll submit things to ASBE. They have different award programs for school. So we actually examined that's the district calls a Function 51 cost, which is their maintenance operation. And it's about $1 a square foot less before and after. So that's a big difference for me. So we do track those kind of things, and I'll try to find some more data on that. We were doing a project on the coast, and they actually asked, hey, can you try to estimate what that would be as we're looking at the options? So we'd be happy to take a look at that. So, great question.
Talking about the impact of the environment, indoor pollutants, off-gassing from paints that have VOCs, acoustics, daylighting. This over here, I was kind of waiting, I was hoping this doesn't come up, because I have no idea how you can hear everything that we say. I wouldn't be able to. So that was running, and then one of these units is running. That's just an example in a space. It's not necessarily a classroom, but it can really have an impact when these things are running, and you don't have the diffused, the less concentration of air coming out of a grill. You've got it coming out and going in one in most of these rooms. And so that really is a huge noise maker that I would have to say that it should impact the ability of some kids to be able to hear and learn. And you just never know what, there are studies that people have really looked at the acoustics, especially the acoustics. There are a lot of studies that suggest natural light and a view outside is really important. I hear it all the time. And our own employees that work in cubicles versus the ones that work around the perimeter, they're always wanting to get that natural light, things like that. So there are studies that really quantify that. There's university studies that do that. We can bring some of those examples to you as well. I think a lot of people, it just depends on how receptive you are to these types of studies. Some people don't really translate that impact onto an environment, what the repercussions are for a student that can't hear or is sick all the time because of indoor air pollutants and things like that. But the deal is that data has been studied for decades, literally. And so, yeah, we'd be more than happy to bring that to you.
Well, I know it to be true, because I'm in education and like the different teaching styles and things like that. Some of the students, need the hands-on and, very practical and just hands-on and that sort of thing. I think promoting them utilities and things like that, I think that's just one other thing.
It's an
that
educational
we can
benefit.
try and convince people that there's not just one reason, just that, say, utilities, but it's also going to make our students more successful in the long term and, support the teachers and stuff. So I know it to be true, but I'm just saying that's another thing that we can use promoting this to the community with whatever we come up with.
Yeah, ultimately, every decision we're making along this path is for the students and the teachers. It's not necessarily about the cost of utilities, but that cost does translate into funding that you're able to give for teacher salaries or more positions to be able to hire. And so everything does translate. I think Alan uses the term impact on learning.
Yeah.
Everything we do.
Yeah, and we did, in C grades, we actually surveyed the teachers. So we have plenty of assessment data, right? We got assessment data for everything. We wanted, though, to get, what did the teachers think? Okay, before and after. They had taught in both. So we try to use that information. What did they think? So we call it a post-occupancy evaluation, but we wanted to get, because I trust in them, if this was an idea, maybe we need to shelve it the next time, or if this was something that really worked, if it works in Cedar Ridge, we would like to use it in Breckenridge. The other thing sometimes we do is we did a school in Odessa where we had the kids, we just had a smiley face green and a smiley face red. So if we showed them something, we asked them, did you like this? If the kids are engaged, especially at elementary level, then for us, that's what's gratifying. And hopefully we are getting building out of the way for the learning to happen. That's what this is for. It's not for building the purpose of the building is to teach. So
Yeah.
I was going to say something along what you were saying, because some of the voters, I feel like, such as my parents, my dad's 1954 graduate, I mean, they've been here forever. Well, what they knew in the classroom when they were here is nothing like we have now. I promise you, they didn't have a little girl pushed in a wheelchair into their room, or an autistic young man that needed high sensory help, or they saw nothing like that in the classroom. Or, there's so many special needs emotionally now for kids that, I mean, the little girl that needed to be pushed in a wheelchair into my room every day, getting her in there was a struggle, just because there was hardly any room to even find a place to let her be with her students. So as far as the ADA stuff, a lot of voters will never understand that part of it too. And that's an environment for everybody too. If she's frustrated in that room and she's crying out, then everybody's, it's just it's a process that a lot of these voters are not going to understand.
Speaking on that, I mean, is it possible to take some of the people like us that aren't in education, like, hey, come to our class at this time and just see, how it is?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I don't go to junior high. I don't,
but I think people do need to see it. I really do.
Because I think that'll be their scheduling piece too, because we've managed that. Because the Hill, we're all together, there's 700 of us there. So we figured out the scheduling piece, because it is a concern. I don't want my 6th grade babies in 8th grader. That doesn't need to happen. So there are some things that we've figured out. But yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely. Side of the office.
I'm going to think dollar stuff way more often than I think a lot of these other things. I do think that just the investment in where the kids are is going to translate to the kids and what they think about. So, and with teachers and what they're doing, like there's going to be an all around, should be somewhat of a shift in how we think about what's going on. Yes. Yeah, on the dollar side, with some of the things that have passed, like Inflation Reduction Act, like that, are there dollars out there for that energy efficiency stuff?
We've done projects periodically for that. Years ago, they had a program called Cool Schools, where they called it, it's ARRA, I'm not sure. And then most recently, they've had a similar, I'd call it a similar kind of fund called ESSER that was in the COVID relief package. So a lot of districts were using that to help pay for air conditioning, or there's very specific things that come with that. When we use federal dollars, we have to do the prevailing wage rates and certified pay. There's a bunch of extra paperwork. So typically it's going to cost, it's nice because you got the money, but it also costs more than what it would normally cost to do something because of some of the federal requirements. It's great to have. So there are things like that sometimes that you can get periodically. Most of our experiences with those bigger chunks, like 2010 was the Rural Schools, and then ESSER was 2020, 2021, I think. There are some private utilities that have in order. We did some grant money with private utilities for air conditioning. Typically, it's based around air conditioning or something like that. And the school's already utilizing. They have an energy savings deal with it. That's why they did these lighting things. They've been trying to do some of those things where there's been some money.
Now, I can tell you that TEA has a program, an allotment, the new facilities allotment, that you get for, I think, 2 to 3 years after you open a new facility. And based on enrollment, how many kids you got going through there and whatnot, but there is some additional funding in those 2 or 3 out years that you can get from TEA, not tied to energy efficiency or anything, just
Right.
the fact that you've opened a new facility.
Yeah.
And it helps pay for furniture and,
Yeah.
some of those unexpected costs that you run across.
Yeah, I forgot about NIF. So when I was talking about the EDA, there's also the NIF of the new instructional facility allotment.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about energy prices stuff that Texas is looking at right now.
So, and the good thing about, so I was mentioning things about energy code, that there's extra implementation. There's good things about it too, because it does have an upgraded, what we would call a building envelope. So the building science, I guess, behind saving energy has really improved, I think, over since when Mike and I started doing this. So we work really hard looking at those options as well. So we'll, again, whatever we can save from your function 51, we don't have to spend, you can use for instruction.
Hey, and I think we were talking about it earlier, but, in my previous district, we had a similar situation where we had an elementary and an intermediate school, and the bond passed, and we consolidated those into one new instructional facility. And who was I talking to that had the numbers on the operational cost? It was in Merkel.
Yeah, it was like 5,600 or something like that. I was going to go back.
They knew more than I did, but I know that our operational costs, our heating and cooling and water usage and gas usage, I mean, everything nearly cut in half, opening that new building compared to what we had been using before. And again, that's an anecdotal thing. That's just a story, but I think it's a valid point.
Yes, the committee, last time we went through this, I think we failed as I think
We see it. All I can hear. It's a little loud with all this acoustic stuff in here. I can't hear you.
I was on the committee the last time we went through this, and of course we didn't get anything. accomplished. Not for, we're past due buildings, whatever it might be. My concern is that it's just us here against the whole community. I mean, that's how bad it was the last time. I think that we're going to need some more than just what you're bringing for us to be able to present it to people that ask us. Because we're already getting asked, and we don't have enough information. So, he was asking, yes, more to that.
We're having to go through a process just because there's a lot of information going back and forth. We do hope that when we get closer, that you're going to have that information. Alan, we're before we've even run all this on. How have you been able to, temper the naysayers that may not be on board, or to get the information out accurately? When do we usually start that, or when you see this issue?
Well, I mean, it's not unusual to have a public meeting or some kind of presentation like this in a short form, not as many graphs, Tom.
We're gonna limit you to two.
Yeah, we're limited to 2 graphs. But it's not uncommon to have that, and then just, to me, all I know is to show this is the market, and this is what the need level are, but I think we gotta tie, in my mind, you gotta tie every improvement that you're talking about with education. So, whether you're talking to a parent, you're talking to somebody who's over 65, you're talking about, like you were mentioning, I think your mom or dad, what's the legacy of the school? What, I always look at it from the standpoint, I went to Wheelock Elementary, several elementary. Somebody had built a big, somebody built a meeting. I just ask people to put themselves in that situation and think about the impacts of other people, other generations have made. Previously, ultimately, people have to make. It's not, money's tight, so you've got to look at what it looks like. I think for us, we just need to bring you the information that we know best as we can without giving you undue certainty of things we don't know. And then show you what we think other districts have done where there's been an education. But I think the other thing is to make sure that information reaches them. So we do a lot of work to make sure that their communication is along the way. And now the state requires the districts to do a non-brochure, but we like to utilize social media to help get some of those messages out. This work, like Mr. Allen's doing with Facebook Live. So this kind of meeting, I've had something we did there were 7 people in a public meeting, and there's 120 watching Facebook Live. So making sure the message gets out is possible.
Did y'all do that last time? Did y'all have any kind of community? I remember all of it going on. I remember Tommy Wimberly's sign, and then the other one went higher. I remember that, but I don't remember like an actual community event.
There was a public forum, because earlier Brian's question, that was a specific question somebody asked was,
So one of
are you
the,
telling me that if we build this, we're going to get better test scores? She was directing it at me. I said, well, I can't tell the future, but I can say that, yeah, as a teacher, I would be more comfortable and be able to teach more effectively and efficiently in a new facility than an older facility. And so, that type of thing. So I remember there was, in this cafeteria, actually.
Is it true that once a bond is set in motion to move forward, that the school employees and stuff cannot go around speaking on it? So that means it's gonna be like,
So basically, you can't use any school resources. So once the bond is called, so you can go home if you're in the grocery store and you're a teacher and someone says, "Hey, we really need this school or not?" You say, "Yes, absolutely." if you're here on school property, using school email, school cell phone, school car, no, you can't do that.
From our own social media.
So social media, social media.
Right.
Has to stay back.
Absolutely, teachers can join political action committees if they like. They can contribute.
So they can talk about it and promote it and recommend it, just not
Not-
from school.
Yeah,
Because that was my concern. Is I think we need to do something, but, you know, is it gonna be up to like 6 of us that can actually talk about it, you know?
Organizations in our town that if they get the information, they would be, I feel like, would be on the side of the school. It's our Kiwanis, Lions Club, et cetera. Our teachers, we cannot say vote for a certain thing, but we can say vote.
Have there been any leads on a location, or is that something that's still not known until it's decided or not? If it's
We don't have anything decided right now.
Is that what you're burning down back there for the? No. Okay.
Well, that's a great question, and
We do have some leads. We know where there's some available land. We have not hammered down anything though yet.
I would say in our experience, active citizens committee, that, I mean, it's one thing if we give information, but if it's your neighbors that are talking and they've seen the information, they're gonna, you know, you guys have asked a ton of questions tonight, which is awesome. But they're hopefully gonna trust that you've asked those questions and you'll have some of the answers now that maybe it's hard for everyone in the community to hear a whole 2 hours of discussion, but they may only be asking one question like, hey, what's the impact? Is this going to really help us kids succeed in the classroom? So you can pass that along to that versus somebody else is going to have a different question about, is there another source of funding we can get to help us with these? Is there any debt assistance at the state level, whatever? We just had one in Haskell that passed. We had some in the Permian Basin area that passed. They had citizen groups who came just like you guys did, and they were the ones carrying the message. So.
What else? Any other questions, comments?
Get a new school.
Yeah, is there a direction, is there a way you want us to kind of focus?
I'll throw it. I'm for new location. I am for all things new. I think it's going to overall help the students. Overall, I think we're going to have better, I don't mean it like that, a better like employment opportunities for teachers to come in here. I think the students are going to learn better. Like this room, I'm sorry, I hate this room. Like the blue and the white and like I'm already disconnected as soon as I walk in here, and it's a visual thing, but I think a lot of our students are going more that way as we have more special needs for all these kids, and we're just putting Band-Aids on gunshot wounds, and it's not
You're serving all the
not
kids
helping.
music
Yes.
and arts and things that right now we struggle to
don't.
have. It's not just about maker spaces. I mean, it's not just about one population.
Yeah, and I agree. Like over at the band on the second band hall, it was a locker room, right?
Yeah.
So.
But I mean, you go into principals that are in like IT rooms that don't have their own spaces.
Or
And
our IT stuff is in a classroom or above a desk.
Yeah.
or-
yeah,
The alarm goes off.
the safety of all of these locations. I mean, these poor babies out on these playgrounds and like going from building to building, and
Getting locked up.
yes, I mean, there's so many issues, so many issues.
I failed to mention that Ed Adams, that blue line that was on that one cost chart, that includes secure vestibules, making the clinic bigger. I mean, there's spaces like that you really need. If you're looking at renovation, you need to look at that too. So,
I think even the electric bill y'all, these windows are
It is cold.
They are not adequate at all, and they're not safe, and I don't know. My vote, that would be my vote to move forward, is to try to.
There are a lot of things that, you talk about the windows, the cold coming in, there are a lot of things that we can do. And these walls have absolutely no insulation in them. It's a concrete block with a brick and about 3/8 inches of gap between there. There's no way we can put, so when we design schools, if we use block, we have a space in there. Now we have to have a continuous membrane of insulation all the way around that building. Continuous insulation is what we call it. And so, back in the 90s, that was causing all kinds of problems. You're making these buildings way too tight. They're not breathing like they ought to. This building breathes, believe me. That's what's going on. But now we use certain types of products that you put these membranes on that allow that vapor to come through, but it does not allow water to enter into that building. It's really high tech. You see Tyvek and things like that on new houses, that paper that they're wrapping before they put the brick on. That's exactly what that stuff does. It allows moisture and water that accumulates in the building to get out, but it keeps air from coming in that is cold air, but it allows that little bit of migration of air back and forth just so that building does breathe. But it is a high performing system that coupled with the HVAC units that you have now and how efficient they are, these buildings are just, they'll pay dividends for decades.
Well, even just the electrical, the internet, like trying to take the START test because they all have to be on the internet now, like paper copies. We were having to move classrooms to try to have internet to take a standardized test. Don't even get started on that. But it just.
Any other comments along those lines of what types of school? Anyone else have
I have a question about data that we might be able to get. So I made probably 200 phone calls the last bond election, that we tried to get passed. And the number one argument that I kept getting was, well, if they're not taking care of the facilities we have now, who's to say that they are going to be able to take care of the facilities if they're new? And to me, it was just a no-brainer. Well, a 70-year-old home is a lot harder to maintain than a brand new home, but it seemed to be like the number one argument. Is there any data that you could bring that would show the difference in, like, for the guys who Mitch oversees, just the idea of how much easier it is to take care of a new facility versus something that is, 60 years old.
a total cost of ownership for all the different options, right? It's like you do nothing, and here's what maintenance costs us if we do nothing.
Right.
Versus
Yeah,
renovating
that sounds great.
versus, the new.
Because I got that
I would
a
like
lot.
to see the difference.
I thought it's because it's all falling apart and there's just no
layman's terms.
you can't keep up with it. In layman's terms, they just can't keep up. You can't keep up.
But I think something else that would be helpful too is like the compression rate, like because we're in a window right now this year that we're not going to get again for a while. So with the compression rate and with us just having an election on our taxes, how that's going to help us out to where hopefully it won't make an impact. Because I know that's going to be one of the biggest things is how is this going to affect my taxes? How much am I paying for this?
Yeah, it'll be a big.
I'm a senior. I don't even have kids in school. I don't care. It's not that all seniors are like that, but it's you hear those comments like I don't have anybody here. But I think if we could also show different ways, whether we go with a new building or renovate, how is this going to affect your taxes?
We absolutely can do a total TCO graph, and last year we did that. Because there was that concern, they were going from 4 buildings to 2 basically. They have a 6 to 12, pre-K to 5 is what they're moving to. So they wanted to see, is this going to save time? Am I going to save in function 51? How does that look across the board? In that process in San Angelo now, trying to reduce the number of their elementary campuses from 17 to 15 at this point. So we've done a lot of, in that case, we've shared a lot of data on operational cost at campus. But I think it is incumbent to give people an idea. That's why we look at the 20-year cost when we're looking at repair costs, because we know those things cycle. Because we want everybody to have that information when they're making a decision about a potential 30-year bond. So they need to know what's coming up. So we can absolutely do that. And I think, I don't know, you were talking about making phone calls and things. I think that it would be important, I think, also to get and you may have done this before, but a kind of a community survey. Districts can hire somebody to do a survey and ask about facility questions. Because generally you find that folks that are, that have littles are going to have a different perspective or different information that they want versus somebody who's, I'm about to have both kids out of the house. And so my needs are going to be a little bit different. And so things that I need to know about or what's important to me about the pool are going to be different. It's going to be different for somebody who's over 65. So I think it's important to find out what is that thing. And in this case, maybe I don't think the building's been taken care of. Well, you guys made things last a long time. And I know you don't have a huge staff either, but I mean, they've lasted a long time. It's just, even when I start seeing this stuff wear out, and I know it's, yeah. And I've seen Mr. Blackburn does a much better job explaining the compression, but what that has done is it's pushed more facility improvements into debts or into a bond. Districts don't. When I first started working with schools, they might save $100,000 or $200,000 for air conditioning and things like that. There's a ton of districts this year that are in a deficit budget, so there's not any. They're not putting away any money to do. They can't put any money away to do air conditioning and stuff like that. So as the tax rate has been compressed, that's great. I like having my taxes lower too, but there is that you got to always weigh the benefit. There are things that are worth investing in, and so it's difficult for districts. It's harder for districts now, I just say in general, to save money for capital projects, because that maintenance and operations is paying for light bulbs and things like that. It's not really for replacing electrical panels, things like that. So capital renew. So there's a difference between routine maintenance, which is what people are saying. Well, I don't understand. They should be doing. Well, they're doing routine maintenance. They were doing the other day we were here. They were chasing down a roof leak. One of the roof drains just. I'm done. And so they're chasing it. Now, how do you get 40 feet up in the air to try to fix something like that within a hard ceiling? Those guys they're not commercial contractors. They have to fix everything in the district. So there's a difference between routine maintenance and capital renewal. Capital renewal is replacing systems. So that's what I would say people need to understand.
Money to replace systems either,
A building's a lot like a car. A building's just like a car. And there are those guys that say, hey, I've got a 1951 Ford, it's running great. But how much do they pour into that car year after year to keep that thing running and make it look good? And they're still paying, 13 miles per gallon gas bills, it's just like owning a car.
I think maybe giving people an idea, so usually you want to get 15 to 20 years out of rooftop unit. Well, these are going on 18, and they're still up there. So they're changing the belts, they're doing the filters and all that. So those things, but there's just a certain amount of life. You're probably not, the oldest rooftop I've seen is 28 years old. And when we did the cool schools, we were glad we did, because in La Mesa it caught on fire. At a certain point, those things wear out. And I think that's why that lifespan chart was in there, so you guys could understand what we're looking at, because if it gets way past the lifespan, no matter how much maintenance you do, they've been waxing the floor and everything, but down there, this stuff's even giving up. So, and it's made of asbestos. So.
Well, we've kept you longer than we promised. Are there any other questions before we go? And we'll get back to work on creating information, and we'll get some data back to you all, some study information, things of that nature, and kind of help you guys at least until you figure out what you want to actually do, you know, what projects. So I think we're kind of hearing some things. I suspect there's probably multiple opinions on what you feel like need to be done, and we certainly want to honor all of those and want to study every scenario that you're interested in. All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
We'll see you in December sometime.